Dr. Robinette has allowed me to introduce my very good friend, Charlie Lawrenson here. Charlie and I have gone back a few years because we have a relationship with our sons who started playing basketball in the Charleston area. And Charlie hails from Morgantown, where he went to Morgantown High School. He's an all-state basketball player, and at one time held the state high jump record. He subsequently went to engineering at WVU and got an undergraduate degree in engineering, and pursued law, went to law school at WVU, and from his law experience, where he did actually graduate #1 in his class, very accomplished individual and nice guy.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much.
In addition to that experience, he served for the state for a long time, and he was a state tax commissioner in the late 1980s. You'll hear a lot about that. He was instrumental in incorporating the changes that brought the ABC Commission from the public to the private purview, and from that experience became a practicing tax attorney in Charleston, and now is the, as you see here, the Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Revenue for the state of West Virginia. So please welcome Charlie, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy his talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And I guess I can't stand there, can I? John had been asking me to do this for a couple years, and I had been out in private practice and raising kids and doing all sorts of things, but now I'm empty nested. My kids are either in college or graduated from college, so I'm able to kind of spring out and do some things like this, and I wanted to share with you kind of a tale of change. That I was a young guy, not much older than you guys, taking the job on, and changing culture that folks said couldn't happen, and talk to you about some attributes of leading as a business student, how you can be instruments of change. And John, I think, is going to go get a handout that I have for you that has a few takeaways with it. So I won't, I won't dwell on those until you get those in front of you, so you have something to take a little note with you. Correcting errors, half of what John said was wrong about me. The biggest half was you look up state records and you don't see me, because you can only set a state high jump record in a state track meet. And it was about 47 degrees and raining like hell on the evening of the state track meet when I was a senior and junior. And I set 70 state records. The current state record 7.2. I got 6.7 at one point in my life. And that's 33 years ago. So I don't have hops anymore. But apropos to this, so John, it's nice and flattering, but I have to correct the record because this is for posterity. I'm being told it's being recorded, and I don't want anybody to come back and throw that at me, because if you look in the class of '79, there's no 6.7 jumping there in the state track meet. So anyway, I was appointed 2 months ago by a guy I've known for 25 years or more, by the name of Earl Ray Tomlin, who's the who is the governor of the state of West Virginia right now. And he asked me to come and talk to you guys. I said that I had this opportunity. He said, yes, let's talk to students. Let's try to encourage them, because there are some great opportunities in West Virginia, even if they're not well advertised. And great opportunities for you guys to interject change and a new attitude in the state of West Virginia, which can be thought of as calcified. State government is pretty slow moving and slow changing, and this is a story of fairly quick change, fairly radical change. And folks like you were, 25 years ago, were front and center in changing how things work in state government. And this is the tale of that. It's privatization of retail distilled spirits in West Virginia, and I'll try to get into. There's a lot to unpack even in the title here. But the key lesson is some leadership lessons from the changes that we embarked on. So what I was going to talk about first is the specific application of how we changed things in West Virginia 25 years ago, and then some lessons to learn from it. There are, for those of you who are uninitiated, and of course, since many of you are underage, you may not know anything about alcoholic beverages. let me tell you about alcoholic beverages. I know a lot about them, okay? When I went to school, the drinking age was 18, by the way. It's the Vietnam era drinking age. But the industry is broken down all sorts of different ways. You can slice and dice any industry multiple ways, and you just Google and you can see how it's broken down in various industries. And the alcoholic beverage industry is broken down in two types, or multiple ways. I think of it in two ways. One, for this purpose, I get the wrong thing. Distilled spirits are a type of beverage. You've got beer, which is the classic here around here, I assume, kegs and stuff like that. You've got wine. You've got all these crossovers now, which are like Smirnoff Ice and Mike's Lemonade and all that kind of stuff, and the things that aren't purely wine or beer and malt beverages. And then you have these things called distilled spirits, which are ancient. I mean, people have had stills up in the hills for years and years and years, and the fights between the revenuers and the guys in the unregulated hillbillies who put stuff in brown jugs has gone on forever. It's happened. There are stills in just about every prison in America, for instance. So inventive with respect to distilled spirits, not a hard process, but that's one of the multiple types of distilled of beverages. That means rum, tequila, vodka, gin, vermouth, whiskey, scotch, all that kind of stuff. That's distilled spirit. That's what I'm talking about. And the industry segment is retail. Who sells this in the bottle form to the ultimate consumer? Okay, and that's the area we're talking about. Very small application in the world, but this is. I just want to kind of orient you where we are in the alcoholic beverage world. We're not talking about beer. We're not talking about wine. We're talking about Jack Daniels. History of booze regulation. I'm silly about this. Prehistory is before 1920. There really wasn't a whole lot. The state didn't control as much as it does now. So just 90 years ago, there really wasn't a whole lot of regulation, state or federal, on alcohol. Even though there was a federal agency called the Agency of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, it didn't really regulate health, safety, consumption, drinking age, the things, DUI, things like that. There weren't many roads. We didn't regulate it. Okay, it was a free kind of cowboy society. In 1920 through 1933, as a result of a whole lot of things politically, an amendment to the Constitution was passed called the 18th Amendment, and it forbid the sale, transportation, and manufacture of intoxicating liquors is the word. Okay, intoxicating liquors. So the U.S. government, with the consent of the majority of the states, actually 2/3 of the states at the time, there were not 50 at then, approved of this amendment to the Constitution, which said we aren't going to allow. It's called prohibition. We're going to prohibit the manufacture, sale, and transportation of Jim Beam or whatever. It's called a noble experiment because it failed. I mean, everything's an experiment. We try things. It didn't work. During the time Al Capone rose and the gun runners and NASCAR started because they had to outrun the feds who had tried to enforce, the IRS tried to enforce this rule. People drank anyway. We had speakeasies. We had blah, blah. I mean, the Roaring '20s, really, because a lot of folks became outlaws. It didn't stop consumption. It just stopped the legality of the purchase. So that noble experiment failed. By 1933, sufficient number of states said, let's repeal it, let's adopt a new amendment called the 21st Amendment, and we operate under that right now. So just to kind of lay it out, we've had the most extreme regulation, deregulate, no regulation, free market, anarchy, right? We had the most extreme regulation humanly possible, which was you can't do it at all. Okay, temperance complete enforced, and then we had now. Now is kind of the compromise, heavily regulated by the states under the 21st Amendment, and restricted, but also in a weird way because of our tax structure and the way we want to make money, we also promote it pretty substantially as well. And so you'll find this paradoxical dual goal in government a lot. So we want to regulate it, the heck out of it, but we want you to buy it so that we can collect your taxes and spend it the way we want to spend it. So that's sort of a paradoxical dual goal of regulation and taxing to pay the costs of Concord and public school teachers and medical care for indigent folks. West Virginia, now I'm now chunking down. I've been chunking from huge to small, and now from the industry to what the governments have done generally, and now to West Virginia. And in 1935, we didn't waste much time after the passage of the 21st Amendment to say, we're going to allow alcohol consumption in the USA and in West Virginia, and we're going to control it. So since 1930, I keep doing that. Since 1935, I want to do this. I want to point to things. Since 1935, we've had this system in place. And it worked pretty well for a long time. And what happened is the state operated in Princeton and in Bluefield and in Charleston and all sorts of areas, state stores. So if you go to PA, you see the store, they've got little dots called the ABC store. West Virginia had those all the way from 1935 till 1990. I just gave it away. I just gave away what happened. But the state was in this business, entrenched, state employees, state leases, state property. The state was selling you the alcohol. They were selling you the Jim Beam. They were selling you the Johnny Walker. They were selling you the Smirnoffs. So that was calcified. I mean, that stayed in place for a long period of time. The state operating essentially a party store called the ABC store. And it's still that way in Virginia to a large extent. Our mother state, if you want to call it that, the Commonwealth of Virginia, just the east of here. It's the same way in Ohio, same way in Pennsylvania. West Virginia had this state store system. Very few other states, by the way, do. Okay, it was a very minority thing over time. The drinking ages changed over the ages. So remember we talked about prohibition, complete prohibition. Right off the bat, it was 21 for liquor, 18 for non-intoxicating beer. And then those things switched over time. By the time I was fortunate enough to be of age and alive, there was a thing called the Vietnam War. There was the 26th Amendment, which allowed and required for federal and state elections, people at 18 years old can vote. If you can die, you should be able to vote. And if you can vote, you might as well drink. So we very quickly after that, states dropped the drinking age from 21 to 18. So that was that way from 1972 until the mid-'80s, when MAD really became a political power, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. In 1981, the state privatized wine sales. We were way behind the times, didn't have fancy wines. You had to go to a state store to buy wine. Eat my Boone's Farm, you had to go to a state store for that. So there's a creeping. We lost part of our market. The state's monopoly was going away. Wine sales were privatized in 81. And in the late 80s, the state was operating throughout the state, 153, if my math's right, 114 state stores and 39 agency stores, which the towns were so small they couldn't support a freestanding store. So you stick it in a grocery store in a corner. But it still had to be operated by a state employee. The profits were very circumspect, uniform pricing, blah, blah. So we'll get into why this fell apart, blew apart. We'll get to some numbers, because I like numbers. I'm a tax guy. So West Virginia had, and I started in 1979 when I didn't set the high jump record in the state, because I didn't do it in a state track meet. That's 1979. Life begins when you graduate from high school. That was when I graduated from high school. The state was making this amount of profits off selling alcohol at these 153 stores. Okay, the state was making about $15 million a year. Okay, and so that money was used to pay school teachers, to pave roads, not really pave roads, but to do road maintenance, to fund Concord, then college, now university, to do all the things the state does and subsidizes and pays for out of its general revenues. So that those profits were transferred to a guy like me, and the guy like me would allocate it out to school teachers through a labyrinth of methodologies. Very complicated. But the state was doing okay until it got rid of the wine sales and then realized nobody was coming to the state store. It was very uncomfortable. So sales fell through the roof and operating costs went through the roof. And so we were in a position when I started my job that I'm taking right now, 22 years ago, of projecting a loss at the operation of a monopoly. And that's not supposed to happen. And so the state was going to lose money selling booze. And we had a decision point, a really easy one, illustrated by this falling off a cliff. We were not collecting, we weren't making money. So what happens when a business doesn't make money? You've got choices, right? When a product line is screwed up, the state was still bringing a bunch of taxes. We had billions of dollars floating around, but this particular enterprise was losing money. This segment of a business was losing money. You have choices, right? You have to make a decision. You can't just let that go. I don't think it would have been politically palatable and have been stupid to continue to lose money selling a product you were trying to prohibit anyway. So we could do two things. One, we could have modernized it. We could have adopted back then the Kmart model, now the Walmart model, of retail, dynamic retail sales. We could have gotten point of sales machines. We could have reduced branding and just really gotten to the marketing business. We could have treated it like it really was a business as opposed to this control thing because we weren't making money doing it. Or we could just simply get rid of it, realize that it's not an essential state function and we can do something else. We can divest, we can spin it off, which is what businesses do all the time and what you guys will be working on, deciding what product lines to keep and what to sell or otherwise just abandon, okay? And so we were faced with a classic business choice, and I was certainly ill-prepared as a lawyer to make these choices. So we hired people. So what did we decide to do? We decided to, clearly we decided to divest, sell, and privatize. Okay, and we designed that. We designed that by pulling together, and this is on the handout I have, we put together a team. We hired young business grads. We hired, and some of them consultants, and some of them are still there. We put together a team that wasn't calcified. That worked with one another, worked with the old line guards, people that had been working in this agency for 25 and 30 and 40 years, and said, we've got to change stuff. You can either buy in with us or not. And we just revolutionized the process. And it was not easy politically, and it was really hard business-wise. But ultimately, after hiring really good people that were accountants and management-type people to help us decide how we were going to do this, we decided to spin it off and sell retail markets, okay? We created market zones, had people analyze data and create market zones where natural competitors would bid against each other for the privilege of operating within these zones. And we did sort of like what McDonald's does and granted exclusive franchises and took a franchise fee in the form of a license, an exclusive license in a territory. So we applied business techniques that you guys are learning, to a problem of losing money and failing to be able to pay teachers and faculty members. And this is sort of the result. The result in terms of just annual cash flows was obviously extremely positive. And I want to tell you one thing about kind of presenting numbers. I wanted to make this look good because it's something I did. If you ask me to inflation adjust this, it doesn't look as good. So one of the worries I have whenever I look at data that are over a period of time like that are the last 30 years, so that are relevant to me, or 35 years that are relevant to me, and my ego is I can make myself look good just by inflation, right? A lot of this net profits should go up, and certainly net revenue should go up. Why? Because $1979 is not equal to a $2010 because of inflation and certainly cash flow concerns. So bottom line is, it certainly stopped the bleeding. Was it a massive success story? Yeah, it stabilized things. So that just tells the story in terms of our annual revenues from the sale of liquor. And we maintain that annual revenue because we are a bailment warehouse that it puts in a uniform markup for every product. We don't set prices. We just put a markup on what you buy as a retailer, and we mark that up as a tax, straight up tax, and it just flows through. So pricing is not uniform. Pricing is determined by Rite Aid if it's at a Rite Aid, or by the party store if it's at a party store. So the state's out of the business, okay, just taxes it. And then out of that tax, revenues flow. And the added bonus was this retail sale of franchise idea, which was truly the brainchild of people like you, okay? What does that mean? That means every 10 years the state goes through this bidding process and gets a big pump of money for people that are willing to pay for market territory, market exclusivity. It limits the number of outlets out there so that we don't have a liquor store at every corner. It's a fair way, if you're willing to pay for it. It's just a bidding process of people allocating this particular business opportunity. And it's amazing what Walmart now is a player. Walmart became a player this year. This year it was Big Bear. Okay, so we don't care. If you're in business and you got money and you can pay us for that right to operate that, you operate it, you sell it, you figure out how you're doing it. So that's what happened from this privatization and function change in the world. Also, what was happening back in this time was there was huge push for trying to get the state in the grocery business, because if you can't make money on one thing, diversify, right? That's a classic business model is, hey, this cash cow is going down. We got to diversify our offerings as businessmen and to offer additional things. We're going to get in competition with other businesses that were otherwise doing just fine without us competing with them. And so we're going to go into the gasoline business. I mean, it's really bad. So the ideas were terrible, but we got them on the table. And we discussed them, and we basically punted. But the federal government's going to be doing a lot of this right now. I mean, the federal government's doing a lot of functions right now that private enterprise probably can do. And this is cyclical. Government takes over stuff and then realizes it can't do it real well, starts losing money, and then how do we get rid of this? And this is a classic application of that. So there are lessons to be learned, I think. And one of the public policy concerns was if we let Rite Aid sell liquor to 21-year-olds, won't that encourage the purchase of liquor? Won't that change consumption habits? West Virginia's population has remained relatively stable. Actually, it's gotten a little older, so this is not even a fair. It hasn't declined significantly. Overall alcohol consumption post 1990 has remained relatively stable. West Virginia is a teetotaling state. We're not a party state. Even though you're in college in an atmosphere where there's a lot of parties going on all the time, I assume, the state, in general, is not among the various states a high alcohol consumption state. It's nothing like New York State or California or Illinois, the bigger urban states. They drink a whole lot more than we do. But in West Virginia, the alcohol consumption has remained constant over time, and this is gallons of ethanol per person. So this is per capita. It's adjusted by population changes. And gallons of ethanol is the way you equate a shot with a 12-ounce beer with, I don't know how many ounces in a wine glass. As many as you can put in is what I get. But anyway, so you see that we're still not a big wine consuming state per person. Our liquor sales dropped off. We could tell that with the other map I showed you. Consumption of that really dropped dramatically, but it still stayed pretty stable since. So our profits go up and consumption didn't go up. The magic is there was a profit incentive to run a business like a business and get rid of all these special purpose state-run stores. So I mean, the good thing is the state has an interest in not having and promoting people getting drunk constantly, and we didn't do it. I mean, we can show at least. By the way, this doesn't prove anything causally. It just shows that the correlation of consumption to regulation, there is no correlation evident from these graphs. Now, this isn't a study. This isn't controlled for anything, but it's reasonable evidence to show at least that we can't be blamed for a bunch of drunkenness. Now, this is the real purpose of my handouts, and I don't know if do you have those, John? Probably makes sense if that. Sure. In this, I apologize for the subject being dry. I mean, it's how do you make alcohol dry? I realized how inappropriate. That's a joke. I realized how inappropriate, truly inappropriate, alcohol jokes are in a college campus. So I've got a freshman son who half of his dorm group got in trouble. And so I'm not going to make jokes about it. Sorry, it's very personal to me. Realizing I don't want to. This is a business model here. I'm not talking. It just happens to be alcohol. One of my favorite subjects. But I wanted to draw some business lessons from that. John encouraged me to not lecture too much about government because I got all sorts of ideas about government, but more importantly about how businesses work, because you guys are going to go out in the field, and government is largely business. These are some takeaways I thought I would talk to you. There's a huge value, and it's undervalued, of an outsider perspective. And I cannot remember the business consultant who wrote this, but so I'm terrible at remembering. But essentially, every element and segment of a business should be thought of as a consultancy. You are a consultant, and you have projects. Even if you are the accounting department in a huge corporation, you've got to sell yourself as adding value or saving cost. And having this outsider perspective is really helpful. Had administrations never changed, had we had a czar of West Virginia that didn't, so there weren't changing administrations and new people like me coming in and new people like you coming in, there would never have been an outsider perspective, and the state would have continued doing it the same way forever, and they wouldn't have even looked at profits and losses. Nobody would have even applied an income statement, statement of cash flows, or balance sheet to government operations. So there's huge value in outsiders looking in. Huge value. And you can sell yourself as adding that value. One downer you have is you don't have experience. One good thing you bring to the table when you interview is you have not bad habits either. You've got technology on your side. You've got a fresh perspective on your side. Sell yourself as a consultant first. And that's, I think, the first takeaway. Because I don't think a long-standing ABCC commissioner, Alcohol Beverage Control Commissioner, could have done this. It took a new face. And people like you that we hired to put the new program in place. There are huge challenges in changing entrenched organizations. I think I have 3 or 4 bullet points underneath this. Once you go into a private enterprise, and by the way, I'm equating government, nonprofit, and for-profit enterprises all in the same boat here. Once you go there and learn enough about your job and can share some changes you think need to happen, you've got to sell it inside. It's not going to happen with you imposing it. And so some of these challenges are, there's a huge class of folks that didn't want to migrate from DOS to Windows. There's a huge class of folks that don't want to upgrade systems. But in general, the features of the new systems are better. And you've got to have that attitude of continually renewal. And there are a lot of entrenched folks behind blue or green screens that don't want to change. And it's really hard to do. So you have to first try to convince and try to co-op, try to network, try to act like a consultant, do things small. But if you have to do it, you have to shove it down the throat at some point. Because everybody's not going to agree, even though you've got to get, obviously, the boss's approval first. But implementing these things is a very sensitive, difficult, very, very big challenge. And young people kind of bring a real cool way, a humble way of doing that. When you can't, we couldn't do this. We couldn't do an incremental change, but there are a lot of things that are subject to reform and change incrementally. A lot of it's software, ironically, because people, there's a lot of systems that are out there that really force change incrementally. And sometimes you have to do version 2 before you can get to version 7. And here, it wasn't that possible to do an incremental change, but I've noticed, and I've done a bunch of different changes. I've kind of gone over a bunch of different projects. Incremental changes are a great alternative. And finally, this is what I was really going to talk about until I talked to John Tuesday after he got back from Florida, is government's unique characteristics and things you can add to government. And you really can. If you have no interest in going and working in a state, local, or federal government, that's fine. I mean, that's fine. But you have an obligation as a citizen to certainly know what's going on. So there's some unique takeaways and characteristics of government I thought I'd share with you. I better look at my notes now, so I didn't put it up there. State and local and federal governments, and when I mean local, I mean the town of Athens, and I mean the county of Mercer. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Local, and the county school board and other county boards. They operate a number of things that you can analogize very closely to what are called businesses, even though they're called government. There are, in fact, West Virginia is now part of a big comprehensive financial statement. Over half of West Virginia's financial muscle is in what are called business-like endeavors and activities. It's incredible how many goods and services are offered. This university is offering you, and it's got to offer you a bargain. It's got to offer you sufficient information to entice you to spend your time here and to compete with other institutions of like goals. And you have to, obviously add a whole lot to that in effort. But you can analogize a number of government functions to business functions. And that helps because you're learning business management. You're not learning public administration, which is a problem in government. A lot of government employees are public administrators. We hired accountants. We hired managers. Why? Because they bring this fresh perspective articulately, unlike me. So that's the first thing. So don't discount the possibility of a governmental career, even if you're a Tea Party activist, even if you don't like government. There's a whole lot in government that can be can be analogized to business and can be run like business. But I didn't want you to get carried away. Governments do have unique and limited characteristics. One is the desire for uniform pricing. Classic in this example, that government is a one-size-fits-all solution in many applications. So we had to sell liquor on the Ohio border to the exact same price as on the Maryland border. And in Maryland, it was much cheaper to buy Jim Beam at the Maryland alcohol store. The local merchants know that. The local grocery stores aren't the same prices because of just dynamics in pricing. The state would lose money in its stores in the fastest growing area, the eastern handle of the state. So there are things like that that are unique characteristics where the state probably shouldn't be in the business of uniform pricing in a competitive environment. We were just losing sales to another state. It wasn't controlling a thing. Government organizations can have an institutional tendency towards complexity, disorder, and converting projects into programs. This is my political statement. Nothing stays simple. I showed you these graphs where, whoa, it looked pretty and it looked stable. I left state government pretty soon after I did this, okay? And I came back. So I was the first person in this position, Secretary of Revenue, ever. And now I'm the last person. So I've got this really unique... In West Virginia, they say I'm my own grandpa. It's sort of like everybody that succeeded me was before me. It's really weird. You don't want to think about it too long. I don't know if you guys like Escher, but it's like one of those Escher drawings where you don't know if you're going up or down. You know, the stairways kind of look like both ways. Well, I'm sort of in that real weird time. It's like a time warp. And I've gone through the wormhole and seen, and they really messed with what I did. You know, you take this, what I did was really good, and they really messed. So they tinker. Governments constantly tinker. Legislatures meet, or city councils meet, or county commissions meet, or whatever. They always meet, and they always want to change something. They want to put their stamp on it. And it becomes more and more complex, more and more disorderly, less and less kind of pristine or perfect. And as a tax lawyer, I'm a tax lawyer, I can't emphasize enough how frustrating that can be and how ultimately self-defeating it is. If the purpose, for instance, of a tax is to raise sufficient revenue to fund essential government services, what on earth are they doing with the Internal Revenue Code? Something else, for sure. Ultimately, complexity leads to disorder. And disorder is it's also called entropy to scientists. And entropy is the second law of thermodynamics, which is if you let a system go long enough and do not apply energy to it, something random happens. An entropy sink happens, like your desk, right? No, I don't know who's... It's my desk. My desk is an entropy sink. It's like, I was thinking about that, and I just stuck it here, and I know where it is, but it's disorderly. Nobody could help me find something on my desk, and that's a problem. You got to apply energy to it to keep it somewhat orderly and rational, so that the successor, the next person, I die of a heart attack. Somebody needs to know where the files are, and so I'm a creator of disorder myself. I mean, and I'm sure every one of you, in some aspect of your life, reflect entropy. Governments are awful about it. Really, really way too complicated, partly because we just stick stuff in file. Start the next project, don't close the last one. And I have a real penchant for treating things as projects as opposed to programs. In other words, lots of little experiments are a lot better than one big program. And governments are really good at these big programs, but they don't do these little projects. And governments are much worse than your business. So what you can do in business is you can prove an idea with a real small application and say, hey, let's apply this idea more globally. Very hard to do in government. So it's frustrating, too. I didn't want to just be a cheerleader for government. And finally, and most importantly and interestingly, I did this thing 22 years ago. There's a statute in West Virginia Code that says, annually the ABCC shall give a report to the legislative auditor, blah, 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 detailing what happened. Reporting. Saying what happened. About 3 years after I was gone, they stopped doing it. So there's no rigorous self-evaluation. You guys, at the end of a semester, get that dreaded thing called a final exam, which is glorious once it's over, and then you have a thing called a grade. Someone assesses how you did. And then you can compare that with your expectations or your peers, or however you want to use the grade for yourself. And and maybe an employer will even look at that, or not. And I think grades are overly important because they're measurements. But they are measurements. They're an attempt. They're an attempt to say, how you did in connection with your stated goal. The syllabus points, the knowledge, the information you were supposed to know, the thinking capacities you were supposed to develop. Government is not reflective at all. I mean, I went back, nobody had studied anything about this stuff. And we had these great business people who went on to other projects. So there is a rigorous lack of self-examination. And it just is very apparent to a guy in a time warp who can go right back to something they did a long time ago, didn't touch it for the last 22 years, didn't touch it. I didn't really care. I voted. I watched, I bought liquor at the liquor stores. Other than that, as a consumer, I paid my taxes. But that's it, I got on with busy and more important things like, driving to Florida with John Fazio and watching our kids play in a national championship, right? When our kids were 10 years old. What insanity for parents to do that. We did that, didn't we, John? Yeah. So I was many more important things in business, many more important things than school. I hate to say that. So I'm not trying to overemphasize it, but the government has this incredible characteristic of just not evaluating itself with all the data it creates. So I forced us to, and so we didn't know if it worked. We didn't know what consumption was. This data is sort of floating out there, but nobody ever took the time to look. Because if we made a mistake, we should undo it and acknowledge it. And there certainly were shortcomings here. We laid off 440 people. We canceled 135 leases. So landlords who improved a building for us said, bye. We messed over, I'm sure, some sellers and suppliers. And now the private market, vicious as it is supplying this essential liquid to people. I think that's about as much preaching as I should be doing. But I did want to encourage you guys. Both my parents were teachers, and they weren't business people. They're sort of suspicious of business people, and they were suspicious. I didn't go to business school, but I'm encouraging my son to, when he gets a chance to declare, to think about going into business school, because I think you guys can transform every organization out there. There are huge sectors that are not for-profit, big business. There are a lot of small businesses, many of which you can create yourself. There are a lot of nonprofit organizations that need business discipline, and governments at every level, from D.C. to the Mercer County Courthouse, to Charleston, West Virginia, to the Athens City Hall, need your skills. So your skills can be applied in a lot of different contexts. And I never thought I'd be in the business of privatizing other businesses. But I did. And it was because of some of the skills I learned actually in engineering school, but I took business classes. Managerial accounting was really helpful. Statistics, really important. This stuff has direct application day in and day out to a lot of enterprises, including government. That's my pitch. Because my pitch also is young people are absolutely essential to government. The average age of government employees is very, very old. And so they're going to retire, if nothing else. But more importantly, they bring a perspective that is, while experienced, calcified in many ways. And you can bring in a lot of change to bear in all these organizations, no matter what they do, by applying the principles you learn here. Because I was out of school by 3 years when I did this stuff. I'd only been out of school for 3 years. So there's rapid advancement possibilities in government as well. That's the end of really what I was going to talk about. I'm a West Virginia person, born and bred here. Want to die here. I love it here. Great place to raise your kids here. You can make it here. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. By the way, I mean, I went to NYU. I taught at NYU. I don't want to live in New York. I want to live here. It's a much safer, better place to raise kids, in my view, than a lot of the alternatives. So I hope you consider developing yourself and contributing back with the skills you learn here, because it's important. John?
One of the things we discuss in some of the classes we teach here, Charlie, is the implementation of radical change, such as you've experienced from a longitudinal perspective, at the outset, in retrospect. And there's differing views whether it should be led from the top or it should be led from the bottom and try to establish a grassroots coalition, so to speak. Apparently, or maybe I'm intuitively thinking, in your early experiences, there had to be some breakthrough where that change and that transition started to formalize. Would you sort of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, this example is a bad one for that, because I think this may be an exception to what I kind of perceive as maybe your general bias, which is to say bottom-up change is the better type of change, the preferable type of change, more realistic. And I'm engaging in that right now much more than I did back in the day. So this example is not a great one because, quite frankly, this was a cram down ultimately. This is one of those things where, hey guys, if you're not with me, ultimately you're against me because we're doing it. We're losing money. We can no longer afford to do this the same way. Prove me wrong. Here are the statistics I'm using. Prove me wrong. And this was unfortunately more of a hostile, top-down, cram-down, not preferable in institutional change. Sometimes radical change is like that. I mean, think of the Affordable Health Care Act. I mean, sometimes you just have to shove it and see if you can get it done. I'm not sure it's a good thing, but that's the way it happened here. On this case study, okay, I've got a better case study right now for that. Where I am over the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, the Lottery Commission, the Racing Commission, three very similar agencies. In order to have one of these little mini casinos, the LVL places that everybody hates, the Mimis and all those kind of places, in order to have those, you have to have a liquor license. Okay? And in order to have a casino, other than the Greenbrier, you have to have a racetrack. So these things are just absolutely meshed together. You've got the same players, the same licenses. You've got three different, very different cultures and different organizations. So at that level, what we do now, and since January 24th, we've done, is we bring the clerks together and say, look at your screen, and say, figure out what the perfect screen would be if we could use you on all three. Because we're going to experience attrition. We're not going to lay a soul. I mean, the key is you have to start off with that. We're not going to lay you off, but we want you guys to figure out what it is about your functions that are similar and dissimilar. And we'll design a solution for it. There's great licensing software. And we've got 3 brands of it just for that one little function. We also have banking and insurance and some other big agencies. Budget systems don't talk to each other. But in order to get systems to talk to each other, which would be radical change in West Virginia, that is starting at the grassroots. We have inspectors going out to the same places for slightly different functions. And so we're trying to figure out what are functionally similar and just get people in the similar room. The legislature will not let us merge the agencies. There are people that lobby the legislature say, I want a beer inspector that I know. I don't want 13 lottery inspectors that I don't. So it's very client-driven, or sort of, if you want to put it in nice terms. Otherwise, it's the way politics works. It's hard to merge things once they start. And so, and this was a huge political fight, even though it was a no-brainer from a fiscal perspective. My concern was consumption, and we didn't even study it. So, bottom line is, in this regard, right now, the only way to make the change is organic and at the grassroots. But you've got to start off with a few major things. This is what we want to accomplish, and your job is not at stake. You are not negotiating away your own job right now. And once you put those two things on, most people want to do a better job, and they want the modern tools. There is every third guy or girl that's in the licensing business and has been forever who does not want to move away from that green screen. Some DOS-based program written 35 years ago. And there are people, but you just got to push through that. And they've never changed the systems. But once you get through that, most people want to do a better job. And there are an incredible number of really hardworking, excellent public employees. I mean, they're awesome. They get bashed all the time for being bureaucrats, et cetera. They're great. These people want to do a better job. And they don't want politics interfering with them. And they don't want to do favors. They want to be, uniform and fair and generally gentle to their customers. So, I think... yes. I mean, I think the bottom line is I would prefer that kind of change. It takes much more time. A dictatorial decree saying, we're out of the business, and that may be the only way you can do that kind of an organic change. But most of the world is through phase-ins and transitions and bottom-up. I concur, absolutely. So you don't need to come in as the boss. It's more important, frankly, if you come in rank and file and say, wow, I learned in business school a spreadsheet program can do that for you. And you make a lot less mistakes and you enter the data once, that kind of stuff. And I learned in business school about this statistical concept. We've got all this data. Can we apply some SAS program to it to see if there's a correlation, if our goals are being met, or if there is a problem we're creating? So yes, I mean, I think organic change is better, certainly, but sometimes you can't do that. I mean, this was a bad case example for that. Doesn't illustrate it very well, I think. Yeah.
Did you work with a lot of data miners or predictive modeling?
In connection with this particular enterprise, a little bit. We didn't have great data. The state stores, I think it was 114 stores and 39 agencies, something like that. Majority were losing money if you allocated any overhead whatsoever. Losing money at retail. So I mean, it's like really hard to justify keeping those stores open. But when you shut them down, you know, I can't get my alcohol. I don't like that either. I mean, we're suppliers, man. We're the I shouldn't say that. I got to stay away from my alcohol jokes. But you know, we're the purveyors. Anyway, so we did get some excellent help to do these market zones. How do you break the state into little chunks so that you can sell exclusivity in those chunks, but not statewide? We didn't want one conglomerate coming in here and dominating the state. We wanted diversity. We wanted competitiveness. So in order to do that, we did a heck of a lot of data mining. A heck of a lot of it. But the data was repurposed. A lot of times in doing data mining, you get great insights, but you don't get precise data. You can see trends, but you couldn't do a financial statement off of it. But yes, a lot of data mining. I had another business over the last 20 years that did tons of data mining, and governments don't do a lot of it. They're not robustly trained in that. But there's a lot. You know, the health industry right now, the propensity and use of data mining would be huge, and most healthcare professionals or public health administrators don't have business knowledge. They don't, and so they don't understand application of data mining techniques and repurposing the vast quantities of data collected. The data mining question reminds me at the end of the Lost Ark, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they find this incredible, powerful thing. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant, right? This the power of God in this box. They stick it in. It's a classic. It is a wonderful image of government. You put it on a pallet, you put it in a warehouse, and you forget about it. And that's what happened in this project. Nobody learned. I mean, the institutional knowledge was not advanced. And so it was sort of a bummer, and I think it can be. And data mining is a great example of it. I had to do a bunch of that just to put this report together. Nobody had run that graph before. Nobody. It's weird. I mean, did it work? I think that's a fundamental question you got to ask.
How do you disseminate that kind of knowledge when you're in such a complex structure like a governmental agency or a state government? I mean, really, when you leave, if you're the only one that knows about it, how do you assure that it gets known about?
37 people, maybe 40, just heard. Is there a system? Yeah, I'm going to put a report out or something. It'll be on it. It'll be in that vast warehouse with. Yeah, we've got reports after. You want reports? I got reports. Yeah, the people. I mean, the most important thing at Concord University, period, is sitting out here. I mean, these guys are the future, and if they pick it up and run with it, they'll take care of me in my leisure years. Otherwise, you need to be working for me now. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to be working till. I mean, I've already. I get my Social Security statement. You know how you get your Social Security statement every other year? They give you this little statement of earnings. Since 1971, I've had the wages withheld. I need you all to do that for me. Get out there and work hard. For me. Yeah.
The bids on your license, you said that's every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wants to do that,
You can buy and sell licenses. I mean, there's definitely a secondary market. I'm talking about the government market for granting that. And so, McDonald's, for instance, gives you a 20-year license to operate a McDonald's at a particular location. If I own a McDonald's, I can sell that. Now, McDonald's may have to approve it, say, yeah, the sales is approved, but in general, they do. So a lot of distribution arrangements that have exclusive territories Beer's a great example. Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch does this. McDonald's does it. All the major fast food franchise arrangements do that. So you can, secondary, it's not regulated. I mean, we regulate only approval. We need to know who we're doing business with because we are actually wholesaling it. So we need to know who is going to be paying us. We have to sweep their account. We get paid before we deliver product. I mean, we don't have much credit risk. So bottom line is, seal bid, it was the first time when I was there. And then the process gets complicated. But essentially, it's still a sealed bid. What happens, though, is there's a second round generally because they want to give preferences to people who already had it. I don't know why. I mean, I've got some real misgivings about giving people preference that didn't pay for it or aren't otherwise a protected class. What the heck are we doing? But those guys had good lobbyists. So the year before the bids come in, they come in and say, well, give us a right to match or give us some discounts so that we can match their bid within some percentage. I mean, you can put any complexity you want, but that's government. That's not business. And so what happened here is the first round was bid mixed. On an inflation-adjusted basis, the first round was the best yield we had, $20 million. This year it's $38 million. Just last year, got 38 for these bids. And remember, we were losing money in this business, and we're continuing to get the stream of income exceeding in every year after $6.5 million. $6.5 million was the lowest year after. So we not only have a stream of income that's reliable, we get these bumps by selling the locations. Our interest in doing that and not just freely licensing everybody is control, primarily control, and limitation. We still have this diverse, I could call it paradoxical dual goals. We want the money, but we want to regulate the product. And there's a lot of that. I mean, lotteries are a classic example, but there's a lot of that. There are a lot of different weird, I mean, think tobacco. Okay, we want to prohibit it, but we want to tax the heck out of it so we can spend it. Real paradox. Government's full of those. And so can I reconcile those two goals? No. Where do those preferences come from? Politics. It got much more complicated. It happens as I was calling it entropy. It's a lot of things, but disorder happens. Great question. It's a really good question. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
Right here.
Yeah.
I noticed in your observations you said that government reforms often lack vigorous self-assessments. Do you feel that it would be important to try to impose some kind of a self-assessment?
Well, another excellent question. The answer is sure, and there are. I mean, we have in government sunset rules, annual report rules, legislative auditors, performance audits. They just fail to meet. They just don't. I mean, it just doesn't work. But more rigorous, better, improved, yes, we need fresh ideas. I mean, it is incredible the amount of structure in government. I mean, you forget it. We have a sunset law. We have a sunshine law. I started going through these oxymorons. I mean, we basically have things that we want to completely end and we want to start immediately. And then the projects turn into programs, and programs turn into a life, and entropy happens, and nobody can explain why this program exists. I think the best renewal is, A, we have an elected representative government. So that's really important. We got a board of directors who hopefully are cynical enough not to buy in that everything government has ever done is perfect. That leads to complexity, but it also leads to self-assessment. But yes, breathing new life into mechanisms that do that. The biggest mechanism is every 5 years, every agency is supposed to go away and justify itself. So that means the legislature is supposed to re-justify the program. It just doesn't happen. Certainly doesn't happen in the tax code because we don't have that in the tax code. Unless something expressly expires, once you get your deduction, your exclusion, your exemption, your credit, forever it happens until somebody has the guts to do radical change. Great question.
Are there any other questions for Charlie? On behalf of the students and the faculty of the Division of Business, I'd like to give you this certificate for speaking to us today. We give you a little jump drive from Concord. And
I can't accept any of this, by the way. The ethics rules just changed. And I hope it's below some threshold I can't mention.
You're among friends.
Or I'll consume it while I'm here. How's that?
Trust me, this is below the threshold. Charlie is an avid runner. I happen to know that. And I see him running often in that gold and blue stuff. so I thought he might enjoy something different.
Well, I want to make sure you knew that I didn't put gold and blue up here. This is Concord.
Yeah, we
it's
noticed
great
that.
colored up there, guys.
Here you go. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you. You should all know that the governor of the state of West Virginia has a summer internship program, and they start to entertain applications late April.
True.
If you are interested to apply, just check the governor's website, and if you may be interested in working for one of the units that our guest supervises, maybe that can materialize, all right? Governor's internship program, paid internship.
Great point.
Yeah, it's a good thing to take advantage. I can help you with that if you need more direction there. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Oh, and don't forget, we have another very good symposium coming up 2 weeks from today. Betty Ireland will be here,
right.
the former Secretary of State of West Virginia. So same time, 11 o'clock, it will be in Ray Hall 304, just down the hall. So 2 weeks from today, and then the week after the internship presentation. Thank you.
Great. Oh, sure.